Live. Good morning to you, Vernon, and how are you doing to everybody who will be joining us today on today's Behind the Markets? It is Finance Tuesday, Vernon. And how are you doing, my brother?
Well, I thought it's evidence. I'm actually very handsome, as you may see.
Well, Vernon, the truth is you only need one person to find you handsome in this world. That's all you need. The rest of the world can have their opinion. Just one lady has to find you handsome. And I say lady because we are a Christian nation, people. But just one lady in your life has to find you handsome. That's all that matters. Yes, thank you very much for being on the show today. And today, just obviously, we will kick off the show on the other side of the break. But today, on today's show, we will be talking about the market breakdown. We have some good news about the Kwacha today. Some actual good news for the first time in over 100 and something days, and I think you know what that is. We got some news also on where bond markets are playing. We saw a jump up in the stock markets. We did see them move quite strongly yesterday, and we've also got some deep dives on the energy sector and the story on forex. And our topic of discussion today, Vernon, is engineering your money game for growth. That is our topic of discussion today. And to everybody, we will catch you on the other side. Give us your name, where you're joining us from, and tag all your friends. You won't want to miss this because today I'm going to release on in the topic of discussion. I'm going to show you my full system. How do I sit down and advise a person on their money game? What is the full picture? And it is done in one picture for everyone to see. I see you on the other side.
Alrighty, thank you so much for still staying tuned to money this wonderful time, and we're just winding up, of course, on a quick one.
Thank you
Hi.
very much, Vernon. And it is kickoff time. Today is Finance Tuesday. So yes, as you can see, there's a dashing fellow here to take you through the markets today.
Confidence,
Yes.
the conviction.
So today we'll be kicking off on our market roundup, our daily deep dive on the BRICS story and renewable energy. We'll be going through our topic of discussion, which is engineering your money game for growth, and our quote of the day. You don't want to miss that. It's going to help you schedule and structure your life. So kicking off on the market roundup today, we have seen that the kwacha is now on its second day of appreciation. It has actually finally snapped off the losses that we were experiencing. We had a long streak of losing on the kwacha, and I think the streak, it did not beat the record before, but we got very close. 122 days. It snapped the loss on the other day, so we thought maybe the kwacha was just going to break momentarily and then continue on its run. But no, it has officially snapped a 121-day losing streak because cash seems to have finally come into the economy. You don't know whether it's the end of the quarter. You know, about this time when you start receiving mining revenues, there are all sorts of things that do start to come in as well to try and help the economy. Maybe it has to play with that. But remember, the number one streak that we had in terms of the losing of the kwacha was 201 days. Yesterday, so we did see the kwacha finally, the dollar finally start to come down below 21. It is now at 20.84, down 2.26%. That was a huge movement down, and the rand moved about 3.13%. Now, this is positive signs, especially for the energy sector, because we could possibly start to see we could possibly start to see some recovery come back after, in terms of, because we are seeing energy prices go up. But on the FX market, we are seeing that it is stronger for the local currency as of yesterday. Now, this was the trajectory we were on if we had not broken this losing streak. We're going to see the kwacha closing this month at 22.36, and possibly, Vernon, by the end of August, we'd be touching a 27 kwacha dollar. That would be a nightmare scenario for people. So at least we finally seen the reversal of this, and hopefully now that will mean that the trend will start to pull back downwards for a longer period of time. Now, other parts of the market we did see yesterday was the bond market is actually moving in a positive direction. These are the three graphs that we have. Yes, people, this is our system that we call the market brain, which actually tracks down as much of this market data. And as you can see, there was a shoot down on the GRZ bond index, which is now going up positively. And we did see that it was up 0.16%. And even the bond price in dollars, the bond index in dollars was up 2.83%. One, because of the currency going up, and also because the market also did well. However, year-to-date bond market is up 5.48% versus a negative of 7.56% against the bond index. And we do see that interest rates also did come down yesterday, just below 24.8, down to 24.79. So we do have a positive movement in terms of interest rates on the market. So there is a little bit of bond buying, or at least bond appreciation, starting to move in the right direction. Now, in the commodities market, Brendan, we did see yesterday that we saw copper down 0.91%, while oil jumped up 5.92% on the global market, up to 84.49. This is the highest that it's been in over 2 months. And what has pushed this? OPEC yesterday made an announcement that they're going to cut barrels by 1 million in production, pushing the price up because they're concerned that prices were getting too low. You see, this is the problem with the oil industry for us. Okay, you have a body that is profiting from oil prices high. In fact, a lot of the oil companies are actually recording record profits in the last year. When they're doing their financials for the last year. So you're actually seeing that this is actually quite intense. Even a bit of news, but then you see this is why the electric car industry is actually of importance, Vernon. And I always try to say, you know, when you're an infant car market like Zambia is, you have the luxury of being able to say, you know what, maybe we should start working on an EV sector. As a country, we possibly need to try and figure out how to start doing this. How do we work with those who are in this sector? Why? Because we are working against an industry that is working to try and make sure that oil is going upwards. You see, the Saudis benefit when oil goes upwards. The UAE benefits when oil goes upwards, because that's how they finance their national development. That's how they finance their sovereign wealth. It's like us praying for copper to go down. What if the world, Vernon, came to us and said, people, we need the price of copper to go down because it's making things expensive in the electronics world? Would Zambia be celebrating? No, we'd be angry
Of course
because
not.
copper is pivotal to our national development. So you have to remember
Mhm.
that the countries that do pump out oil, it's pivotal to their national development. So they're going to push the prices up as much as possible. So they're always going to try and at least see the price somewhere around 85 because they know that if it gets to 90 or 100, it starts to create problems in the global economy. But in the at least going positively, we will have to try and fight this. So, the most important thing I think for us as a country, as I said, is we should start working on pushing this. Yesterday, we did actually even get Tesla figures to show how strong even copper should be moving. Tesla figures actually showed a 36% increase in Tesla car deliveries. 430,000 Tesla vehicles were delivered in the last quarter. 440,000 were produced. So that shows you EV demand, and BDY is outproducing them. So we're already expecting to see 36% growth in the EV sector this year, which should push up copper demand going forward. So this consistent movement of EV growth is actually very good for Zambian copper going forward, but it just appears that global copper demand is still having a problem getting back up. There are obviously a little bit of shakes in the global economy that we cannot get rid of. Other things that we are seeing in the global market also is, as I said, oil. Gold went up yesterday, back above 2,000. 0.20, up 1.5%, and in dollars, gold is up 9.5%. In your now, here's the outlook of what we're expecting to see if you keep seeing this trend. The only good thing I can tell you, Vernon, when it comes to the Zambian FX rate is that we're now on a negative direction, so this might change. However, we're at risk if we keep seeing oil prices and we don't see the FX rate pull back much stronger. So hopefully this month, if we see a pullback in the FX rate that can counteract the 7% jump up in oil prices so far, then maybe we might actually be able to not see an oil price hike. But if we do not see the FX rate perform, people, this is what we're seeing towards the end of the month. Your energy price movement will be short lived. The fuel price reduction will be short lived, and you may be looking down the barrel of 29. So it really is incumbent upon us to actually have a good month with our currency, or else you will taste 29 kwacha fuel for the first time, and that may not be happy for many people. Now, this is your wealth insurance assets, your Bitcoin, Ethereum, and gold. Yesterday, obviously, because the kwacha dropped by 2.26%, but these things also did underperform. Your cryptocurrencies also did underperform yesterday, down 3.7%. Ethereum up down 2.6%, basically unmoved, while gold in kwacha was down 0.71%, mainly because of the reduction of the value of the dollar. Because gold did move up, if you remember right here, we did show it moved up 1.5%. It was counteracted by the strengthening of the kwacha. So in terms of all your assets, year to date, what we are seeing, Vernon, is bond market is up 5.5%, stock market 7.6%. Yesterday, we did see a strong rally in Zanaco shares, mainly because of the dividend announcements that we have seen, and we've got dividend announcements actually starting to pour in. This actually might improve a lot of the market, and that might push things up. You see what most investors do, Vernon, with their dividends is they take their dividends and they buy more shares. So whenever a company issues out a dividend, in other words, a share of its profits being given to the shareholders, they do something called snowballing, where they utilize the dividends to buy more dividends. It's like if somebody owns property and they use the rental income from their property to build more houses so that they can get more rent in the future. So that's what buying more shares with your dividends is good for. So you see that when you get dividend announcement, and Zanaco being one of the bigger shares, it's one of the eight stocks on the market which are billion kwacha shares, and when they tend to move the market with them. Dollars up 15.2%, remember, down from the 17.6 because we're finally seeing kwacha appreciation. Gold also shaved off a little bit. It was heading towards 30%, now 26.2. Bitcoin still 94.6% up on the year, and Ethereum up 75. But remember, people, I must warn you, the side of the equation that says USD, gold, Bitcoin, and Ether, those are heavily volatile. You don't go above 15% of your portfolio in those things, because those things are meant only to hedge against broad market downturns in the stock market and in the bond market. And we're starting to see the stock market move away from the negatives it's been in the first quarter, and in the second quarter, it's now pushed up because it's now up 7.6% year to date, pulling up from where it was down 1.5% at the end of last quarter. Remember that the stock market has been the underperformer throughout the year. Now, in terms of our four horsemen, and what they're telling us today, we did see that obviously inflation risks are up mainly because of the OPEC announcement. We did see industrial data that was relatively mixed yesterday. We saw Chinese CAC and PMIs fall to 50 by surprise. We saw Japanese PMIs in decline, but still starting to pull out of that decline a little bit less. We did see American PMIs also come in a little bit negative, also with Canada and Indian PMIs. In other words, the Indian production sector also started to pick up. Swiss PMIs also down yesterday, but a lot of that has to do with what's going on in with the banking sector. Now, our friends from Turkey are finally experiencing inflation that's coming down to a sort of normal range. Inflation in Turkey year on year is 50.51%, up 2.29% on the month, but it's at least coming down. It's slowing down. European PMIs are also in contraction territory. They also came down yesterday. So you got the EU, German manufacturing sector is coming down. Italian manufacturing is coming down. A lot of manufacturing sectors are stumbling as well. Now, also that could be harmful to Zambia is South African manufacturing sector is also underperforming. That could mean more expensive goods coming out of South Africa and more expensive imports. So just remember that for our sake as well. Now, coming into today, some of the early pieces of news that have come out of the economic calendar, we have seen that German exports are up 4%, so that's good signs for growth. But imports are also up 4.6%, with the trade balance that is only up at $16 billion, except for the $17 billion that was expected previously. Now, we're also looking at what we're also expecting today is European PPIs, which should show supply chains are now seeing less and less inflation. That's the expectation. And exports should start coming down mainly because of oil prices not being at their strongest. While we should also be looking at jobs, the job turnover numbers for America. How tight is their labor market? They've got something called the Job Opening Index. They are expecting that there are only 10.4 million jobs open in America. And also crude oil data, in other words, crude oil reserves, should actually tell us how markets are doing, Vernon. And that pretty much, Vernon, sums up our market roundup with a bit more visual today, people. I decided to work out a little bit so that you don't see me just blurting out words for you. And we do now have our charts here for all of us. Now, coming into our deep dive for today, Vernon. Oh, but we should touch into some of the news before we do get that. Some of the news from our 5 things to know. I think you read them out. One being ZCCM is now going to transition to a royalty holder. A lot of people are going to tell us negative things and all that. Well, all I can tell you is that if you're a shareholder of ZCCM, you are basically doing a crip walk. The reason I say this is simply because ZCCM is now going to go from making only about $5 million a year in revenue to close to about $50 million a year in revenue just from collecting 3%. Yes, they're going to 10x their revenue, though 95% of their revenue is going to come from Kansanshi, meaning ZCCM is likely to start paying much higher dividends. Also, because ZCCM has got a dividend policy of about 30% of profits. Now, because it's going to be cash flow positive, it will also be investing in trying to do some exploration in mining, but that means that its issuance of dividends will start to improve. Now, its dividend yield is a little bit low because it's a big company and it may not be paying out huge dividends, but it does mean that they do have a lot more cash to be paying out dividends. So if you are a ZCCM shareholder, you may want to pay attention to what is going on. And obviously that company is now going to be flushed with more cash. That's why I said that it was a better deal, simply because they were getting cash flow, Vernon. The purpose of an asset, and I keep telling everyone this, the purpose of an asset is to generate cash flow. It's not for vanity. It's something that, yes, you can store wealth in, but it has a valuation to it. Now, the royalty rights of ZCCM is it does hold the royalty. In other words, it still owns the shares. It's just the shares are compensated through royalty rather than dividend. So it hasn't stopped being a 20% shareholder. It still has 20% voting rights. It still has 20%. It even has an extra board member. It's just that instead of waiting for profitability, it's getting paid from revenue. That's the only change. Okay, and we've gone through this thing. It's a 130-page document. I know that unfortunately, if you want to hide something from us black people, put it in writing. That's the problem. And hopefully, that 130-page document was a way to hide things from us, because people don't even read a post, man. So I'm going to read 130 pages. But anyway, yes, it's up to us who are in the economic media spectrum to distill that information for you. It is distilled, people. It is just a royalty deal. That's all that it means. And a royalty deal does not mean a person is not a shareholder. So they do have shareholder voting rights. They just don't have shareholder dividend rights because they've converted it into shareholder royalty rights. That's all that it means. Okay. So it's like a musician, Vernon, saying, instead of me getting, it's because musicians get paid from every sale of music, correct? Correct. So what if the record label
Absolutely.
went up to a musician and said, listen here, P. Diddy, we're going to pay you off the profits of the record label, not the sales of the music. Most musicians will say, no, thank you. We
Yes.
don't know how you're managing this record label. I don't want to be caught on the wrong side of an unprofitable record label. So you keep the record label, I'll keep the music sales. That is simply what they've done. But so therefore, the Kansanchi can then do that. And by the way, a lot of people do this. They either borrow money to a company and then get paid a royalty, or they get it. And it is quite a profitable model. For a lot of companies that are royalty owners in the mining sector are actually very profitable. They pay good dividends, and those are stocks that are sought after. But anyway, because we don't participate in ownership in the economy, this is what we do as people. We tend to do this a lot. Um, when what you should be doing as people is sitting down with your financial advisors, going through your books and seeing what the opportunities to make such an investment are to you. Is it right for your portfolio? Is it time for you to do such, especially if you're in the stock market? The only problem with that stock, I've always said, is its illiquidity. And I have said before that one of the things that should have been done is that in order to get people to buy into it or to understand it, there should have been a much more bigger push to get people to also own shares in it, because the more people own something, the less they just do this, and the more they do this, and the more they
Mhm.
use these, not headphones, your ears, or they use those things to try and listen. Um, Other news, I think we did see that it was announced today that Global Fund will be releasing $1 billion altogether worth of funding to support HIV, TB, malaria, and COVID support. So, Ministry of Health says Global Fund has disbursed a total of $1.5 billion towards the fight against public health threats such as HIV, TB, malaria, and COVID. Yes, Global Fund, the same Global Fund that they're threatening Uganda with. Eh, this conversation, it's unfortunate. And I always keep saying it's unfortunate how we've allowed ourselves to get into the grips of these people so that now they give you free stuff. And then when they start saying change that law, change that law, now you're fighting for your health versus their desires, their creepish desires, which always end up doing nothing but trying to go after children. But anyway, that's another conversation for another day. Let's get into the deep dive of the day, Vernon, and the two stories which I've chosen to go into a deep dive on for today is the story about the energy sector. And yesterday we did see a conversation about in our deep dive for the day, the first one, we did see a pitch. We did see news about a change in the energy sector, an investment in the energy sector from a company called Chieg. I think that's what we got it, a Chinese company, which has now pledged a whopping 3.5 billion billion dollars in renewable energy in Zambia, trying to invest in there. And they're obviously going to start by they said they're targeting 4 provinces to build renewable energy stations, with a power purchasing deal. So in total, Vernon, we're now looking at a grand total about $7.9 billion to bring in 5.9 gigawatts of renewable energy of investment pledges so far in 2023, which will probably be materialized over the next decade. People, you don't just set up a power plant next week. It takes a bit of time for that. But you did see that China is there leading the race at 3.5. It's like the Chinese saw and said, Why are people dropping more cash than us? We are the ballers of Zambia. So that's what they came in and effectively said. Uh,
Yeah.
so, like, obviously, they decided to bikini big deal and they dropped about 3.5 billion. UAE obviously earlier did give you a 2.4 billion worth of energy pledges with 2,000 megawatts. And UK did put in, UK investors have come collectively with an investment pledge of 2 billion with 1.5 gigawatts. So that's where you get your seven breakdown. So what this has done, Vernon, is it brings into question two things. The companies like Copperbelt Energy are probably going to benefit from this because this gives them more electricity in the next over the decade for their export gains. You know, Copperbelt Energy wants to tap into East Africa. They want to do a lot more exporting. So that's going to be something for that stock. Obviously, remember that Copperbelt Energy is the lead stock on the market. So obviously, as a shareholder, they're probably going to benefit from this. The mining sector, the industrial sector, they are a lot going to benefit from this because this is what they're looking for. They're looking for a lot more electricity and a lot more supply because electricity has been one of the issues. Fuel, electricity, labor, and the cost of things and the cost of money. These things have been the real issues, the pillars. If you're a manufacturing company, you're looking at the cost of energy, the cost of money, the cost of people, and the cost of inputs. These are your issues. These are your four issues where all your costs come from. The cost of money has obviously been high because of interest rates. The cost and also the cost of things have been under pressure from inflation, but that's been stable. The cost of energy, the biggest problem has been the electricity has been unavailable. Fuel has been expensive. So these have been the two problems. So now, if you can try and now work on at least the electricity equation, we might actually help some of the manufacturing sector in this country. Now, what does this look on the outlook? What does it do for the outlook of electricity? I want to take a look at it from part of what we're saying of where they should be targeted policy. Now, targeted policy, Vernon, I have said that if you look at the last 7 years, and now we don't have the 2022 data because we're waiting for the ERB for that one, but the 2014 to 2021 does show that the chief contributor, chief, number one contributor to electricity demand growth is the household sector. And this is why I keep saying that a lot of this should be coupled with the household sector having not just the household sector should not just have, it shouldn't just be big grid growth. Because the problem, Vernon, boils down to when you go to the household sector, look at over the last 7 years, the last 8 years, how much residential connections have increased. We've gone from
Yeah.
560,000 to over a million. Okay. So
It's a lot.
every day, Vernon, every day you drive past the civic center
Mm,
or any place
it's a
or
lot.
a church and you see a married couple coming together, just look there and see, there's another house. That's more electricity consumption happening
Yes.
because these two are about to introduce another person into this world, or possibly the other versions that people use to introduce other people into this world, which we're not going to talk about because it's a family show. But what we mean is that that we should actually be looking at the amount of people that we keep growing into our economy, the rise of urbanization. So this is your number one issue, and this is why I keep saying the number one target we should be also looking at is as we're bringing the grid to grow, we should also be trying to give people independent energy, and that's why I was talking about trying to get solar systems to people's homes, as many of them as possible, so that the domestic sector can take care of itself. The same way, Vernon, that the water sector, they failed to deliver water to people. So people have built boreholes before the previous people tried to tax you for taking matters into your own hands. The things that we face in this country. Somebody wanted
Yeah.
to honestly put a borehole tax because they failed to deliver water to your house.
Mm,
That's the country we live in. But as a result, one of the things I just wanted to drive at is if we can try and couple this effort, what we will be is we'll be in a permanent energy surplus if we take as much of the domestic sector off the grid. Because as you can see, it has been the lead contributor to grid growth. The mining sector has barely grown. Now, we're also going to have a mining sector, Vernon, that wants to quadruple its output. So if the mining sector wants to quadruple its output, it will now start putting stress on the grid. Manufacturing sector, now if you're looking at the fastest growers, manufacturing, quarry, and construction, though quarrying and construction has been the slowest growing, we're trying to grow our manufacturing sector. It's been growing by 10% a year in terms of its electricity demand. Finance and property and trade have also been growing by 7%. So these ones are also going to start making demands. Now we have to ask two questions, Vernon. We have to ask one question. And I'm going to throw this to you. Where should electricity go first? Where you are consuming or where your job is coming from? Where should electricity go first? To the consumer or the person who produces and creates jobs? Answer that question.
You probably want to give electricity to the people who are generating income, creating jobs, and then I think people at home, consumers, they don't even have the capacity, the ability to even buy power to store at home. Unlike we give those at home who are just but consuming, and allow
Mhm.
those in the mining and those manufacturing suffer.
Will you have money? In fact, let me put this to you this. Will you have money to buy electricity to consume at your house if your workplace was not existent because it had no electricity?
Of course not. Where would you get the money? So that place has to be functional first for me to have money.
Exactly. So, if those are planning on growing and we're trying to create jobs from there, if we're going to have an industrial sector and a mining sector that are going to need a lot more electricity, we're going to have to couple this grid expansion with a domestic off the grid strategy. If we can do this push and pull move, then that means we're setting Zambia up for the next 20 to 30 years. See, that's the long-term thinking we need to start talking about. Okay, we need to be in a perpetual energy surplus. So that's why I said, especially the bigger houses that consume, and the smaller businesses and the malls. If you can get malls, houses, and small businesses, malls, big houses, and small businesses off the grid and to be solar independent, if they can have battery systems and everything where they can manage themselves, and you can create a system where they can store their own energy, produce their own energy. If they can do that the same way, Vernon, that people drill boreholes at their house. If we can have that kind of system, then we can have a lot of energy surplus that we can then start pushing towards the industrial sector and also, Vernon, towards export. Because one of the things that also helps the kwacha get strong is if we have money coming in from exporting electricity. So if we have a strong energy surplus, and the good thing about this, by the way, if we're getting so much renewable energy investment, that means that we will be green energy. You know what that also does? If you've got, you see, one of the things I want a lot of people to try and take into consideration. Now, Zambia, obviously, we may not have enough energy for big plants, but I just want you to think about this carefully. The world used to work where factories moved to where there was cheap labor. Okay, it moved to China because there was always cheap labor. But the new push today is green production. So it's not cheap production, it's triple profits. It's profits, people, and planet. So if we could make the pitch, if you become a largely renewable energy nation, and we already are, by the way, use water, but if you're a largely renewable energy nation and you have really invested in your grid to become that, then you can start to negotiate with the world and say, since you people wanted cheap labor, how about green production? And what more green production nation than Zambia? I mean, we should eventually even start making the arguments, Vernon, that our copper is green copper. Okay, copper in Zambia is green copper because it's the electricity that comes from it, that comes to produce it. Sorry, is done with green energy. Okay, so even if we could tag our copper as green copper somewhere along the supply chain, if we use blockchains to tag our copper and be able to say Zambian copper is green copper, it could actually get into higher demand. I mean, these are the things, these are the marketing techniques that we should be utilizing somewhere in the world to get premiums. People should be coming here to say, no, we'd like to mine here because there's green energy here that we can utilize, as opposed to where we have to mine where it's coal-fired power stations that power up those mining operations. So those are the things that we should be able to market. And if the world is honest about being green energy, about being green, then we should be able to market ourselves as an industrial hub. So if we can get a green, you see, this is why I've always said Zambia, and to everybody in the comment section, everybody who's watching, give me your thoughts on this. And in fact, Vernon, you give me your thoughts on this as well. I said that if we're going to go out there and play our role on the global economy, Zambia must have a name. So everybody in the comments, if you're watching, just give me a comment on this one. What name should we have? I've given two options. Okay, and I got them from the president's first speech, and I've given two options. One of them should be Zambia, the green machine, okay, and Zambia, the natural beauty, okay, because he actually did use those terminologies. And the reason I say the green machine, I always lean towards the green machine because it speaks to green industrialization. That we should be a marvel, and I'm going to quote his words. He said, "We should be a marvel of green and sustainable industrialization." And that is a way to stand on the global market. Because think about it this way: you buy from Japan because they're precise, you buy from Germany because they're efficient, you buy from America because they're creative. When you buy a product from France, you think passion. When you buy a product from Italy, you think elegance. When you buy, I don't know what the UK is, they're bland and they're colonialists. I can't give them anything. But but almost every, and you buy from China because they're cheap. Okay, we buy from these countries because there's a brand association. And I think if Zambia is smart, we can say Zambia, the land where we produce green. Okay, that sounds like we're producing chamba. But what it means is we should say we're producing green. However, the natural beauty speaks to our tourism sector, that we can produce things that are natural and beautiful, and that can speak to our tourism, and that can speak to even our products and our manufacturing, that we can lean that way. But if you were to be given the two, Vernon, which one would you go for? And to everyone in the comment section, give me your thoughts. Which one would you go for? The green machine or the natural beauty?
You, as a country, you need to progress, for starters, and that will need the industrial sector to equally be functional, to be operational. Of course, you don't want to be known as a natural beauty or a tourism destination in the world. And you see, this is why now you have people wanting to evade the lower Zambezi because they know it's just dormant and they want to make use of it, and maybe setting ourselves on the trajectory of a green machine would be better because of course there's industrialization taking place and we're still maintaining our natural resources and of course still in a green environment, and we maintain that even with the industrialization activities going on.
Okay, so we got two votes here on the green machine. One in the comments. At the end of the show, I will count the votes in the comment section. So everyone, please give me your vote in the comment section by writing green machine or natural beauty. Green machine or natural beauty. Give us your votes. I'll count the votes at the end of the show to tell you which one has won. I'm sure most of you are watching will see, but I'll tell you which one has won, and it'll be interesting. Now, going into our second, and everyone just keep voting, keep voting. I know people like elections, so going into our next conversation, our next deep dive, there has been a story coming out, Vernon, about the BRICS countries, and I have been asked about this. Now, this isn't a fully confirmed story, okay, but it is a story coming out that the BRICS countries are currently working on a currency that they can trade amongst themselves to try and help strengthen their bloc. And obviously, this picture is lacking Cyril Ramaphosa, and I think he is there, probably just cut out. Wow, that picture is not
You
racially
can actually see
sensitive.
the South African flag right behind there.
but you can see his hand. So you can see this picture is not. They like cut out the only black guy from this picture. But anyway, but when you look at this picture, obviously there are stories that at their next meeting they want to start discussing it. South America is already working on a currency. Africa, we have pledged that we are going to try and work on a currency, so that is something to remember. Now, the question everyone asks is, everyone is looking at this like, what does this mean? Well, it means nothing for now because Africa Free Trade has been signed for how long? That hasn't done anything yet. It takes time,
Yeah.
people. The euro was drafted in the early 90s, but was only materialized in the mid 2000s. That's when the euro became mainstream, like 2001 to 2005. Okay, so that's what you have to understand. So this takes like at least a decade to try and harmonize this. And you're talking about gargantuan economies: India, China, Russia, Brazil, South Africa. These are mega economies that are really, all of these except South Africa are trillion-dollar economies with trade lines and bank deposits and investments and all sorts of things. Look at how tricky rebasing was for us just alone. Zambia, a less than 20 billion economy. Look at how tricky rebasing was for us. Now imagine these leviathans trying to now reorganize a new currency. That's difficult. The thing that helped that helped Europe was the whole the Cold War. It helped Europe unify back then, and their trade lines were unified, and they were just trying to get Germany involved. Now, for this to work, the two countries you actually have to pay attention to, Vernon, in this picture are the two countries on the left. The two countries on the right, India will become the biggest country in the world, yes, and it's probably going to become the biggest economy at one point. But the two countries on the left, that handshake between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, actually is the most important part of this. And I'll show you why. It has to do with gold. You see, when you start looking at gold by nation, this is gold data. So if you look at the top part of this, the combined national global reserves of gold by geopolitical bloc, you could see that in the year 2000, in terms of metric tons, China and Russia together only had 774 metric tons of gold, while the Western Bloc, which is the US, the EU, the IMF, and the Bank of International Settlement, had 24,000 metric tons of gold. While if you shift along to 2021, look at what happens. Europe has started to reduce its metric tons down by 2,000, and a lot of these other ones have been selling. And look at what's happened with China and Russia. They have now multiplied, okay, almost sixfold worth of gold. And as you can see, that the Western Bloc has actually been selling and losing its gold to these two nations. Now, why is this important? In as much as we may not have a gold-backed global economy, you must recognize that for your currency to be the dominant currency in the world, you must have a lot of gold to back it. So before, Russia and China only had 2% of the world's gold, while America, and this is why the dollar is the global one, because America is the biggest single country that has the biggest stock of gold. It had a quarter of the world's gold in 2000 was sitting in America. And only 2% of the world's gold was sitting in Russia and China combined. Well, if you fast forward 21 years, what are we seeing? 11%, almost 12% of the world's gold is now sitting in China and Russia. And 22% of the world's gold is sitting in America. They've dropped down. The Europeans have dropped down by 7%. And that block has actually dropped from 72 to 61%. So it's telling you that China and Russia are buying gold for a reason. So there's some credibility to this. Look at how much gold. Look at how much they're expanding. When you look at gold purchasing, the people who are the net buyers of gold, the biggest net buyers of gold, who are responsible for 55% of all the gold purchases, are just China and Russia. Next is Uzbekistan with 5%, Kazakhstan, which are very close to Russia, by the way, then Turkey, India. So as you notice that when you put the BRICS nations together, about 60% of the world's gold purchasing is happening just with the BRICS nation. And then the Bank of International Settlement is buying 3% of the world's gold. And the IMF is actually one of the world's biggest gold holders in the world. I think it's number 3. The IMF holds the third largest gold reserves in the world. That's why I keep telling people. They tell you that no, gold is not important. If gold is not important, why is 70% of America's reserves in gold? Why is 70% of Germany's reserves in gold? 60% of France's reserves in gold? 71% of the Netherlands' reserves in gold? Why do these people keep gold if it's not important? That's what they tell you Africans, so that you can surrender your gold. But as you can see, going up the ladder, the biggest sellers in gold have been European countries. They've been selling their gold. The IMF has recently been selling down its gold stocks also to get dollars onto the market. But this tells you that Russia and China are your biggest buyers. Why are they the biggie buyers? Because eventually having gold gives them freedom. Okay, that is so there is some credibility, but it's going to take time. They need to become the number one gold reserve in the economy. So before we get to our topic of discussion, I will count the votes here very quickly on the whole green machine versus the natural beauty. We are seeing that me and you voted green machine. We got one vote for green machine here. We also are seeing here that green machine again gets a third vote. Gamma rays are green. The Hulk is green. Land is green. Luminda said this. So therefore, we green machine. We get that from Luminda and Dumbo. So again, we got 5 votes. But Pethias has changed to natural beauty. But it says green machine sounds more industrial. So green machine, green machine, green machine. It appears with a whitewash, Fernan, people want the green machine. So we should actually get this to the country because you know what it says. If you brand yourself then you're able to create a direction, a vision, an image of what you want to put out into the world. So if green production is the thing that you want to promote, then that is the stuff we'll be exporting. That's the way we'll be farming. That's the way we'll be producing. Everything will be pushing towards the green machine. And everyone can see that people want green. Hopefully they want green for proper reasons and not for the other green that people seem to like a lot. But I will put this vote out on my page. But yes, we are getting votes on this. Now, today, Vernon, quickly to round up, I want to give us the topic of discussion. And we have been talking about we have been recently talking about the growth mindset, getting out of the fixed mindset and into the growth mindset. So yesterday I opened up with change and the importance of having a change mindset. So today I want to remind us of the 8 sources of. I want to remind us quickly of the 8 sources. I don't know if we can just maybe close on this. I want to remind us of the 8 sources of resistance to change, and the 8 sources of resistance to change that we are getting. Sorry, if our tech team can just wind that on. Yeah, culture, competence, companionship, community, correction, concealment, confirmation, and compassion. And one of the reasons why these are, Vernon, is the things that you are used to, that you have grown accustomed to, are things that are often fashioned to your identity or your feelings. Now, that is why we talk about emotional spending. So today we want to really talk about breaking this habit of emotional spending. Now, what we've seen here is that these are your sources. You often will do things and continue to do things because that's the way you've always done them. Culture. You
Yes.
often do things because that's all I know. Why will you invest your money here? I only invest in this asset because that's all I know, and I'm not interested in learning anything new. So where you are competent, that's where you do. Why do you keep money in cash? Because I don't know how to invest it. So that's what you start to do. Why do you spend money the way you do? Well, because I have to hang out with friends, and for them to accept me, this is what I want. Or I have to spend money on all these things because women won't like me if I don't spend money, or guys won't like me if I don't buy weaves that are this much or this much. So this is the things. Companionship becomes part of it. Maybe you're doing what community does. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. So because this is what this is what the community does, I will spend like the community does because they demand of this. Correction. Maybe you feel like your past, your youth was an injustice. I never got this when I was young. So now is my time to buy all those toys that I want and to just enjoy them as much as possible. Concealment, maybe you are trying to hide certain things about you. Well, I don't speak confidently. I'm not quite confident. Maybe I don't think I'm too handsome. So I need to hide my inadequacies so that people think a certain way about me. Confirmation, well, how will people know I'm rich? How will people know I'm doing well if I don't? And how will they say, you're doing well if I'm not Uncle Darama around, if I'm not splurging every way? And compassion, perhaps these are the things that make you feel nice about yourself. They talk to you well. Perhaps it's people that talk to you well. So the sources of where you are comfortable and where you're resistant to change are these areas financially, and they often tug at your strings with emotional spending. So today I'm going to quickly jump, Vernon, to the quote of the day, which comes from Pastor Greg Crochelle, who says from his book Power to Change and also his sermon series, he says, "You do what you do because of what you think of you." Your number one issue that drives your decisions, especially financially, has got to do with what you think of you. So I'm going to start by showing you this process, and everyone wants to see this. This is what I call the comprehensive wealth pyramid. I actually designed this to help people understand what your whole wealth journey is like. And I know it seems very busy, but this is what all my work is like. These are the systems that we develop. These are the programs that we develop. This is why we educate you, because everything here boils down to this. The top part of it, Vernon, is your fulfillment. So, we've talked about your legend, your legacy, your lineage. Your legend being the life you want to live, your legacy, and your lineage. Now, this is what you want to become. This is the life you want to build and the person you want to become and the person you want to be remembered for. This, Vernon, is your most emotional tug thing. Now, the reason is that people tend to not want to look at this because it'll eventually tell you you may need to change who you are. You may need to walk away from who you are currently. And therefore, you have to maybe let go of your current culture, your current community. Maybe you have to let go of these things. And now that becomes a problem because you've gotten comfortable with these things and you're fighting who you are versus who you want to be. But I'll tell you, Vernon, when you look at who you want to be, your aspirations and ambitions, that tugs at your heart. So I'm going to tell you something, Vernon. You're a young man in your mid 20s. You are likely to live somewhere between 71 and 75 as a young man. Young women will probably live up to 80. So if you ask yourself, Vernon, what do you want to be and what life do you want to see yourself having lived and things you have left behind and people you've left behind by 75? That visual of who you want to become or who you want to end your story as is what will drive you to stop being resistant to change. I have come to see, Vernon, that people who are resistant to change don't see the future. So they are comfortable with the present and they only want to stay in the present. But if you see the future, you see the need to change because you see the difference between what you are and what you currently are and what you could be. Then you have to then acquire freedoms in your life. So the next stage is to acquire the four financial freedoms, which is freedom from work to avoid worry, freedom from worrying about chaos, freedom from worrying about your loved ones, freedom from worrying about your basic needs. And in order to do that, you have to hit your goals of your harvest, health, higher education, home ownership, and huge purchases. In order to do that, you have to manage your assets, manage your taxes, manage your estate, manage your cash, manage your risk, and manage your debt. And in order to successfully manage those things, you have to take actions. You have to become an action first person. You have to strategize, prioritize, think win win, listen and learn, synergize, work with people, and always improve. You have to believe in wisdom, knowledge seeking, quality advice, understanding, believe in courage, devotion, believe in spreading love and doing things selflessly. You have to exhibit the character of a person who's responsible, disciplined, patient, diligent, purpose driven, a keen learner, and visionary. So these are the personalities, the ABCs of the personalities you need to become in order for you to manage these six things properly, in order for you to achieve those five goals, to unlock those four freedoms, to get to your aspirations. Then you start to see the need to change. You stop being resistant to change when you see your future. I just want to leave everyone with a quick four things that can actually help you because people do emotionally spend. So I'm going to give you four things to help combat emotional spending. And the first, and I'll tell you that emotional spending, because most of you form emotional attachments to the things you spend money on, and it makes it impossible to actually get rid of your impulse spending and to live by a budget. Okay, because you'll write a budget and say, no, I'm not sticking to this thing. This thing's not working because you're not working on the inside. So the first one, which is number two, there is purpose-driven living. When you are living on a purpose-driven path and you can see those legend, lineage, and your legacy, when you put those things together, you're saying, this weekend out is costing me my legacy. It's costing me my legend. Okay, so now there's a bigger thing. There's a cost-benefit analysis that you are playing towards this. The second one I would also put is if you're Christian, prayer and fasting. If you're not, meditation and fasting. You need to fast from the things that you have pleasure from because there's a dopamine release you're fighting right now. Because that is what's leading you towards being impulsive. So to remove those cravings. So you don't understand, Vernon, why is it when money touches your hand, you just go crazy and you have to spend it in that way? Why? Because there's a lot of pleasure senses that you're playing with here. And you kind of have to rewire the chemistry. That's why Jesus said some of these things can only be defeated by prayer and fasting. So people, regular fasting from these pleasures or deprivation, let me say, that might be something you want to do. Perspective on products. When you look at the things that you buy, Vernon, all they do is give you a shot of joy for the strength that you need to get to the next part. If you have that perspective, you view joyful experiences and joyful products as fuel in a car. It's not that you don't buy a car to put fuel in it, you buy a car to get from point A to B. That is the purpose. You may buy it to get there in style, you may buy it for other reasons, but you buy it primarily to get from point A to B, not to put fuel in it. So if you're living life to only consume products, that is the same as a person who buys a car, puts a full tank of gas, parks it just to look at it. That's what, by the way, Dwayne Wade was doing. He bought himself a Rolls Royce, parked it, and just looked at it. And people told him, "Are you mad? You're losing money." And then the people around you. You want to start scrutinizing the people around you. A lot of your spending decisions are coming from there. So you will not change these things, Vernon. You will not fast. You will not have perspective. You will not change people if you do not see your life as purpose driven. So until you do this, Until you do your wealth pyramid, it becomes very difficult. So, this is the way to engineer your money game for change. Because if you do this carefully, then you'll be able to engineer your whole life effort and everything for change. Why, Vernon? Because of our quote of the day: you do what you do because of what you think of you. Any thoughts before we go?
I'm just thinking where I can get this book and start reading it as soon as I can.
That is good for you, my brother. And thank you very much to everyone. Yes, we've got Black Chain Joe says you have to post that comprehensive wealth pyramid. I need it. Black Chain, it is coming out for everyone. Most of the work I do is all the work I do is based on that. All my hard work and everything that we put is based on that so that everybody can see. And I think the winner today, Vernon, by vote of confidence by the people, is at Zambia. So we need to get a letter as Money FM and send this to State House that Zambia should be
Mhm.
branded the Green Machine. That's what we should be going for. And I'll just start by
A
saying,
beau-
Green Machine, Green Machine. Have a wonderful day, my brother.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.